Hi, I'm James Marshall. Welcome to Marshall Gold Discovery State Historic Park. Are you here looking for gold? Well, we've got it. You know, they've only found 10 to 15% of all the gold in California. Yep. But most of the gold that we have is not in the creeks and rivers anymore. It's up in the mountain, in quartz veins. It's hard to get out and expensive to get out. But we still have millions and millions of ounces of gold up there. Would you like to see some of that? The first kind of gold that I found here, I'm James Marshall by the way, was placer gold. Placer is a Spanish term that means sandbank. We find gold like this in the sandbanks along the creeks and rivers. Now this piece here is a nugget. It's all gold. But this piece isn't. This one's got quartz in it. You see the white rock down inside there? There's just a little bit of white rock down in that piece. And because of that, it's not a nugget. It's not all gold. Let me get rid of this radio. When the miners realized that the gold and quartz were associated, they looked for the source of the gold. And it's not here in Coloma. All of our gold here is placer gold. It all washed down the river from somewhere else. So when they realized the quartz and gold were associated, though, they went looking for the source. They went upstream, and they went up Dutch Creek, which goes off to the left up there. And when they got up to the top of Dutch Creek, they found veins of quartz in the rock that had gold in them, like this.
But it all washed down?
Yes, and this happens oftentimes during big storms, and we have what we call here in the wintertime frost wedging. What happens is, it's cold outside during the day, it's raining. Water seeps into the cracks and fissures in the rocks. And then at night, it freezes. Well, water, when it freezes, expands. And it'll pop a rock like this off the side of the hill. It's going to tumble down, and eventually it's going to get in the creek. The creek is going to accelerate it along the bottom at high water times, and pretty soon the quartz will be broken away. In fact, if you hit that rock with a hammer, what would happen? It would just shatter. Quartz will just shatter. And it shatters with sharp edges. That's called frangible. So it shatters even more readily. Pretty soon, the rock is gone, and all that remains is the gold. That's how we get this. And placer is a Spanish term that means sandbank. So we find this gold in the sandbanks along the creeks and rivers. So Placerville is Sandbankville. Okay? So we had placer mining going on here in Coloma, and then up in the mountains, just up here on the other side of Mount Murphy, there's a town called Kelsey. They had hard rock mining up there. Now, placer mining is more of an individual venture. Hard rock mining is a corporate venture. And so we had corporations moving in there to mine this deep gold. We've only found 10%, 10 to 15% of the gold in California. But most of the gold that is left is in this form. It's in the ground, it's hard to get out, and expensive to get out. But right now the price of gold is $1,350 an ounce. This is an ounce. And that's a $20 gold coin. Okay? 1 ounce of gold. So I want you to put that in your hand and pass it around. I want you to feel how heavy it is.
Do I have to pass it?
Yes, you do. Yes. That's how much gold the miners found on an average every day in 1848. An ounce of gold per person per day. Back east, men working in factories made $1 a day.
Wow.
So what are you going to do? You're going to stay there and make $1, or are you going to come here and make 20? That's the question. So, a lot of people came here. A lot of people borrowed money to get here. A lot of that money was never paid back. Because when they got here, I might add, in 1848, they were finding an ounce of gold per person per day. But in 1848, there were only 8,000 to 12,000 people in the entire state of California. But in 1849, 90,000 people show up. Now in 1848, they found $10 million worth of gold at $20 an ounce. In 1849, they found $50 million worth of gold. But you split it between all those people, and it comes down to a half an ounce, $10 a day. The next year, we get another 90,000 people showing up. They even find more gold. but they're splitting it between all those people. It comes down to a quarter of an ounce, or $5 a day. A couple of years after that, the men are back to working for wages, $1 a day. It's over with. It's over with. So,
For the individual, but they had hydraulic mining and dredging and all that.
that came later, the hydraulic and dredging. Yeah, first it was placer mining, then deep mining, and then hydraulic, and then dredging. So,
What percentage stayed after?
okay, well, first of all, 10% of the people that started for California never made it. They died on the way, mainly because of waterborne disease. Once you got here, another 10 to 15% die within the first 2 years of being here. 5% of the people that got here went home feeling as if they were wealthy. I figure about 35% of the people that came here actually went home. The rest of them got stuck here. They never made enough money to go home. They never saw their families again. They lived their lives out here. So you think about that. Well, in 1850, that census shows that 80% of the people in the United States are farmers, and California is a farmer's paradise. You can get 4 crops out of the ground here if you want to know what you're doing. Back east, you got 1. So you just stay here, get married, have a family here. You don't have to go home. We got all the resources. We got more resources than the rest of the country. You can't do that. That's out of the question. You can't do that because there aren't any women here. You can't get married and have a family here. The census of 1850 shows that 8% of our population is female. Up here where the gold is, it's only 2.5%. And women would not marry miners. They would not make good husbands. And the reason for that is they're in a tent along some creek. You're going to have babies out there. You're going to be cooking outdoors in the middle of winter, taking care of babies, trying to get them fed and clean. No,
It should be.
it's not going to happen. You got a choice, and you're going to make the right choice. You're going to marry a merchant. You're going to marry somebody who will put a roof over your head. And so these miners never married. They were bachelors. They lived usually 2 to a cabin up in here in the hills. And if you drive around in these hills, you'll see these little cabins. And they live 2 to a cabin just for just to have somebody to talk to. And they never had any interest in doing anything. I mean, what makes a man get up and go to work in the morning? He's got a family to feed. They didn't have that. So they just subsisted. And they died as old bachelors. Parity in California, the next census is 1860. We've got 15% of the population is female. Up here, where the gold is, it's 8%. Parity between the sexes isn't reached in California until 1900, 52 years after Marshall discovers gold. Why? The average age of those miners back in 49 and 50 was 22. It's 52 years later. They're gone. That's what it took to get parity in California. Yeah. Pretty sad to think about because everybody wanted a big family. That was the norm. A family of 9. 7 kids, mom and dad. So,
Well, everybody maybe but mom. Yeah.
Mark Twain talks about this. It was a big deal to these miners that they weren't having families, that they couldn't get married. Mark Twain writes about it in Roughing It. He says, I did not experience this myself. A friend told me this story, and I believe him to be true. His friend is walking down the street in San Francisco, and up ahead of his friend is a big burly miner walking along, big beard, red shirt, boots. And the miner notices a young girl taking care of an infant in a crib. And he walks over to the girl, and he looks down and he looks at the baby in the crib, and he turns to the girl, and he pulls a poke full of gold dust out of his pocket, and he hands it to her. And he says, "There's $200 in gold dust in that pouch, and I will give it to you if you will allow me to pick up and kiss that baby." Because that man knew he was never going to have a family. He made his bed. Yeah.
Why didn't he stay in San Francisco?
There were women there, but vast majority of them were married. Let me give you an example of that.
Yeah, right. It's Fred's business venture.
Now that didn't happen in 49.
How come it didn't happen here? You'd think
That didn't happen in
somebody
49. That happened in 51.
Okay.
It only took 2 years.
Yeah.
Remember, this is really remote over here.
Okay, well,
You don't just jump on
Here's-
the freeway.
the vast majority of people here, I told you, were young men, average age 22. And this is not the Victorian era. Queen Victoria is the Queen of England at the time, but her moral values have not spread around the English-speaking world yet. It's more Edwardian or Elizabethan. And the boys had a song about just what you were talking about there. And it went, the miners came in 49, the whores in 51. And when they got together, they made the native son. Yeah. And we had that occurring right here. There was a house of ill repute right there. Right there. It was the Texas Cafe right next to that building.
Oh, really?
Yep. Yeah, right next to that building, this side of it. Texas Cafe. And the madame in there had a boyfriend, and he owned the building. And he got sick, and everybody thought he was going to die. And so he deeded the property to her. And then he lived. And he wanted the property back, and she shot him. That's the real history. A lot of people in their diaries, these are people that were in California in 1848, not 49 or 50, but in 48. They came over from the coast, from the ranches and that on the coast, and they went home with 50 pounds of gold. Well, what's that all about? Why isn't it 60 pounds of gold? Why isn't it 20 pounds of gold? Okay. Well, the height and weight of a man in 1848 was 5'6" on an average and 140 pounds. A man that size would be riding an average size horse or a medium size horse. That horse would weigh 900 to 1,100 pounds. That horse would have the capacity to carry 225 to 250 pounds. So you've got the rider, you've got all the tack, you've got his food and his eating equipment and so forth. You got about 50 pounds of leeway on that horse. That's why they were taking 50 pounds home. Yeah.
Buy a mule.
A mule, a standard bred mule, which would weigh about 1,100 pounds, can haul 300 pounds on its back. That same mule can pull 3,000 pounds on the level. Now you get two mules together, and they'll start working in unison. They'll pull 12,000 pounds. And of course, the Mexicans weren't as excited about gold as the Americans were, because gold was found all over Mexico. And so they had that experience. In fact, oftentimes, you would find a Mexican panning for gold with Americans and other people standing behind him watching what he was doing, because they had the experience and we didn't. And that's where a lot of our mining terms come from, like placer and arrastra, lots of stuff like that. So they knew what they were doing and we didn't.